Hello everyone, Bella Malloy here, host of Seek Travel Ride, and happy to present you with another episode of Cycle Shorts, these midweek little bite-sized episodes to fill you up with wanderlust between our full-length feature episodes that go out every Saturday. Today's episode features guest Laura Willerton, who shares an experience which occurred during a cycle tour through Central Asia. Location is no man's land between Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan. Let's just say a mix of high altitude, inclement weather, and a dash of food poisoning all help to make this experience on this day extra memorable. Without further ado, let's listen to Laura recount that day for us all here.
So I should prelude this story by saying this whole bike tour was my partner at the time, Bruno's, idea. I'd not done much in means of cycling outside of the UK before, and I didn't really know what to expect, especially about places like Tajikistan, which had never really been on the map for me. I understood we were going to be at altitude, but I'd been told by him and locals during the trip that it doesn't snow in September. I'd read a couple of blogs about people getting caught in blizzards in September, but again everybody kept telling me, it doesn't snow, so stop worrying about it, and I trusted them. During the Pamir Highway, we spent a number of nights sleeping in the family homes of sheep and goat farmers, as we just weren't set up with the camping gear for the extreme minus temperatures that it dropped to at night. It seemed all the accommodation Mark and I overlander had packed up for the season, so we'd had to cycle longer distances each day than we intended. We were sleeping on mattresses with the families and eating the food they kindly provided. We just completed the infamous Akbaital Pass at 4,700 metres, and coming down from this was cold. Really cold. And fair enough it wasn't actually snowing, but there was snow and ice on the ground. My fingers hurt and my body ached from the washboard surface. I kept skidding in the gravel, swapping from one side of the road to the other, trying to find a decent stretch. When we saw a large circle in the dirt, instead of a yurt where our homestay was meant to be, I'd got quite scared and upset. In the distance we'd seen a herd of goats, and I was thrilled. This must mean there was a family around and shelter for the night. We'd asked the man and he'd welcomed us into their home. Inside the house, the wife had the stove on. We played with her young son and she presented us with a big bowl of fried potatoes. It was the best feeling in the world. It had been a couple of days now with only bread and sheep's milk. The next day, we were elated to find out we only had 1 more kilometre before tarmac, and we cycled to Karakul, a tiny town surrounded by snowy mountains and set on a lake. It was the last place before the final 4,000 plus pass, Kizil Art Pass, into Kyrgyzstan. When we got there, we met 2 German cyclists that we'd spent some time with in Mergarb. We ate fried potatoes at their homestay, and they told us they were getting a van to the top of the pass the next day. I decided after our experiences coming down from Akbaital that I wanted to get into that van too. That evening a blizzard descended on the town. There were strong winds and heavy snowfall. I was pretty happy with our choice of the van as we watched out the window while we ate dinner, 2 more portions of fried potatoes. The next morning we both woke up feeling a bit off, which was unsurprising with our diet of late. I'm a vegan back home, and I think the milk and eggs had really started to take its toll. Not one to waste food, we forced down our breakfast of 2 fried eggs, and we went to meet our friends and get in the van. The van was excellent. He let me play music from my phone over the speakers. We drove over some of the worst road condition we'd seen on the Pamirs, with the lake next to us, snow falling, all to the track of some 70s disco. I was really happy we weren't cycling, and through the distraction of our impulsive karaoke, even my stomach had started to feel better. There was a border war not long ago between Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, which means transport can't cross the 20 kilometres of no man's land between the 2 countries. If you want to take a taxi the whole way, you need to pre-arrange that with someone on the Kyrgyz side, so you can jump from one taxi to the other. We'd not done this. We left Tajikistan, drove up to 4,200 metres, and there the taxi dropped us. Snow was falling and about a foot of it was on the ground. As I loaded my panniers back on the bike, I looked at my 32mm tyres and asked my partner, "What the hell are we doing?" We didn't have a choice but to cycle. At least it was downhill, I thought. Slipping in the snow, our bikes kept dropping into deep potholes hidden beneath the surface. Multiple times we nearly fell. I'd had some waterproof shoes, but they'd fallen off the bicycle 10 days before, and although there was a 30-kilometre search for them, they'd already been snapped up. So I was wearing thin canvas plimsolls, the only shoes I could find to fit midway on the Pamirs. These were now absolutely soaked. Every 500 metres we stopped to blow warm air on our frozen fingers, and I got more and more panicked about our progress. About 3 kilometres down, I'd already had enough. I saw some abandoned buildings labelled homestay with a wonky wooden sign, and I told Bruno to search for someone. I heard music coming from a small wooden cabin and knocked on the door. A man in full military gear opened up, and he invited me in. I ran back into the snow to call Bruno in. The cabin was warm, the stove was on, and a pan was bubbling. They gave us hot tea and offered us fried potatoes. Bruno had turned a funny colour at the sight of them and left. He told me he'd thrown up that morning's eggs in the snow, and it was official. We had food poisoning. We communicated with the two military men through Google Translate. None of the phones had signal. We were between countries, but they had downloaded an English dictionary. I said we needed a taxi. No way to call, he told me. My mind was racing as I tried to figure out how we'd get off the mountain, and the snow was coming down harder. A car passed by. It must have been heading to the top to collect tourists. I explained over Google Translate that we needed to stop the driver on the way back down, ask him to send another taxi up to get us. There was no way we could cycle through the snow. As we saw the taxi returning, I stood up to speak to the driver. Sit, I'll handle it, one of the officers told me. He went outside, had a conversation with the driver, and returned to tell me, "Oh, there's no room in the taxi." "Well, did you ask them to send another car?" I asked. He looked at me puzzled, and I started to cry. That had been our only chance of getting a ride. Hearing me talk agitatedly in English, someone else came into the room, someone higher ranking. "Stand up, get out," he told us. I looked at him panic-stricken. Looking at my leggings and plimsolls the officer had been chatting to over Google Translate told me to put on more clothes. "I'm wearing them all already," I told him, and he looked at me like I was insane. I'd really started to feel it. So we stood up and we were turfed out into the snow. I was pushing my bike and I couldn't see now because I was being blinded by the snowfall and the wind. I was really crying. I didn't know how we'd cope. We couldn't ride the bikes, and it would be hours pushing our bikes 17 kilometres. It would get dark. We'd freeze. Hearing a dog barking behind us, we turned around, and one of the officers in just a t-shirt was running after us. Come back, he said. "You'll die." We were invited back into the cabin. The man who'd kicked us out had learned the phrase, "I hope you hold no resentment to me," and he said it to me about 20 times. We shared photos and what information we could in our limited language capacities. We drank hot tea and repeatedly turned down offers of more fried potatoes. I thought they said someone was coming for us, but then that seemed to be retracted. My limited Russian was really taking its toll, and it was hard to understand what was happening. Then there was a knock at the door, and outside were standing two officers, with an army vehicle waiting to escort us down. They'd radioed their base and someone had come for us. I was so overjoyed. On the way down, as they laughed kindly at our stupidity, I looked out the window and was incredibly thankful we weren't pushing our bikes in this blizzard. I honestly don't know what would have happened to us. We crossed into Kyrgyzstan, and now we just had the 30-kilometre cycle between us and a warm homestay. The snow was still thick, but now there was tarmac beneath it. As the mountains got further into the distance and my body finally started to relax, I couldn't help but look back at them and think about where we'd just been and what had happened. The homestay in Saritash was a welcome sight. I sat slightly dazed in the cafe with a hot cup of coffee for a long time, feeling very grateful to the Kyrgyz army and trying to process what had happened. And when dinner was served that night, it was fried potatoes.
Thank you so much, Laura, for getting in touch and sharing exactly what it was like on that very memorable day. I imagine you've probably not felt the same looking at fried potatoes ever since. I also just can't imagine what it would have been like in that moment. Freezing cold and out there pushing your bikes at one point with those canvas shoes absolutely soaking wet, not in the right clothing for the weather out there, and filled with despair at being sent out of that hut from the border guards as well. I'm so glad that fortunes turned around for you all and that you continued on with your trip as well. And listeners, I'm really excited because I'm going to take a deep dive with Laura for a future full-length episode to come and learn more about her long-distance bike tour that she has been on as well. I'd just like to do a special shout out to all of you who have continued to support me on Buy Me a Coffee and sent through a small donation to show your appreciation for the show I'm producing here with Seek Travel Ride. The best part of this, actually, more than any financial contribution, are the messages of support which you've shown my way, and I just wanted to read a couple of them out now. The first one is from Felicity Cloak, and she says, "This is inspirational as I trudge the streets of London with the dog preparing for my own cycle adventure. What excites me so much about this, Felicity, is that through this message I started following you and I am now watching your own cycle adventure take place. It's one that's particularly close to my heart because a big part of it is food as you make your way on a culinary adventure across the US. So I get to look forward to your food updates every day, and I love the fact that you're listening to the show while you do this as well. Another message here, which is from, I'm going to try and pronounce it right, Monongahela Times? Maybe it's a silent G. Monongahela Times? I'm sorry, you might have to let me know how to pronounce it. But anyway, your message really hit to my heart. And it said, "This is my favourite cycling podcast. I'm currently taking care of my dad who has Alzheimer's 5 days a week. I have weekends off, and I always look forward to having Saturday morning breakfast with you and your guests. Keep up the good work. It really takes me away on an adventure for an hour or so, and is a delightful way to ease my burden as it sets the tone for my day." Well, I cannot overstate how deeply I felt this message when it came across to me, and I'm thankful that these episodes each week are helping you get through what I can only imagine must feel like such a difficult period in your time. I'm sure it takes so much energy to be your dad's carer and to watch a loved one in those final stages there. I'm really glad that Seek Travel Ride can be a distraction for you and fill your cup of wanderlust to take you to some different places as you hear the stories of my guests as well. Thank you so much for supporting the show. Now, if you want to have more news from the Seek Travel Ride community, be sure to sign up to the Seek Travel Ride newsletter. You can find the links to sign up in the show notes. I send a newsletter out each and every month, and in that you'll find a preview of the guests who are going to be featured on the show, some more news from the community, as well as ways that you too can get involved with the podcast. Once again, the sign-up links are in the show notes. Click on those links and you can look forward to Seek Travel Ride news hitting your inbox each and every month. Until the next episode, my name's Bella Malloy. Thanks for listening.